You're tuned into news across the galaxy where they talk all things LA Galaxy with the Nag Boys. Let's start nagging.
What is up, fellow G's, and welcome to News Across the Galaxy. This is the MidWeek show, and I'm your host, Edgar Zuniga. LA Galaxy is coming off a not-so-convincing victory over struggling Minnesota United FC on Sunday, and up next is a visit to toasty Frisco, Texas, and FC Dallas. To help us break down this matchup, please welcome once again, friend of the show, Jose Tellez of Goals TV. Welcome back, Jose.
Edgar, thank you so much for having me, man. I feel like it hasn't been that long since our last show together, which means it hasn't even been that long since our teams last saw one another. This time we're in Frisco. I'll be at the game. I'm super excited for it. We'll see what happens. But thanks again for having me on today, man. I'm excited to talk about it.
Thank you for coming on. FC Dallas has lost 3 of their last 4 matches, including a really tough loss to Sporting Kansas City over the weekend. And currently, FCD finds themselves in 11th place. What has gone wrong with FC Dallas, Jose?
I'm actually going to turn this around and say lately more things have been going right despite the record. I will say that since the firing of Nico Estevez and moving into the Peter Lussan era, I think we're actually playing much better soccer. I think some of the results lately have been somewhat unlucky, especially when you look at some of the games, right? You say lose 3 out of the last 4. I think, adding some context there. One of those was a game we probably should have won up in Seattle, which is a place that we have a long history against the Sounders. I really still can't even comprehend how we coughed up a 2-0 lead and lost 3-2. Again, it feels reminiscent of the Real Salt Lake game, but almost, I won't say worse because it's an away game. You and I both know how difficult it is in MLS to win on the road. But at the same time, this is a team that we just have so much experience against. To not walk away with the win there was difficult. Losing 1-0 to Cincy at home, despite not starting Ferreira, not starting Musa, out shooting Cincinnati by almost double-digit figures, and not getting a win, I think is probably, it hurts a little, I think, for the Dallas faithful, who have to sit here and really kind of watch a lot of our backups get minutes because of the injury situation that's taken place at Dallas. And, I talked about that quite a bit in the last episode that we did together for the last Galaxy FC Dallas matchup. So I won't rehash a lot of those things, but, with those 2 results specifically, it really could have gone either way. And we both know how great of a team Cincy is. Seattle's back in the playoff picture. They're a good team in the West now too. The Sporting Kansas City lost this past weekend, where if anybody was paying attention, I think they noticed most likely that we were heavily rotated, preparing for the game tonight. In fact, the Open Cup rematch against Sporting Kansas City. So being there at Children's Mercy Park for 2 games within the span of 4 days will be interesting. I think we were saving a lot of our starters for that. After going down 2-0, clawing our way back, tying the game, I think was what we wanted to see as Dallas fans. Not being able to see it out does hurt, but I do like seeing some of our younger players like Nolan Norris get minutes. I think for us, we knew 7 games before Leagues Cup in July that we had to be ready for. We had to rotate, and if we're going to pick one of those games to rotate, the Sporting Kansas City is probably the game to do it. So, lost 3 out of the last 4, but I will say this: if you're watching Dallas play, it feels like a different team in a positive way, despite some of the results.
Yeah, I'm looking at the match report right here, and it seems like Kansas City player Zora Bazong, he picked up Zorhan, I think that's his name, picked up but too quick with a yellow and a straight red near the end there. What happened?
There's a meme already going on about it on the timeline. I think he was slightly provoked in a very cheeky way by Areola, and rightfully so. I think Paul had every right to do what he wanted to do in that situation, which was Basong kind of stood up in front of that throw-in, right? And tried to kind of make life a little more difficult on the throw-in, delay a little bit. Areola quickly throwing it. And when someone's this close to your face, I think Areola just called his bluff, so to speak. And Man, threw it right at him. Like threw the ball right at his face, right?
Ouch.
And yeah, I sat there and watched it and couldn't believe that Ariola was, and I respect it as someone who was kind of that player back in the day a little bit. I respect it. But yeah, I mean, it went from 0 to 100 really quick, and I think Paul got exactly what he wanted. He got a reaction out of the player, and it didn't impact the end result too much. But moving forward, you definitely don't want that type of, if you're a Kansas City fan, right, with an open cup match on the horizon, you don't want that to happen. So maybe it was strategic, maybe it wasn't, but it was purely retaliation. And at the end of the day, those types of actions don't go unpunished.
Uh, how does the how does the departure of Nico Estevez affect the team? Because, uh, like I said, the last time we spoke, you mentioned that Ferreira was hurt,
Mm-hmm.
and Nico Estevez still played him, which I was surprised. I remember seeing Ferreira getting up and warming up, and I was like, no, he's not. And then he puts him in there, and I'm like, are you serious? Yeah, your boy's gonna get hurt. He's gonna suffer a long injury. And right now, surprise, surprise, Ferreira's hurt. So how did that whole thing go down with Nico Estevez? Because looks like a lot of MLS coaches have been let go so far.
Yeah. He's one of several, right? In this like weird pre-summer window, if you will, where yeah, just he was, I think, maybe the second head coach to get fired this season. And I think most of us as Dallas fans saw it coming. And if not, I mean, there were the loudest of us, myself included, who were calling for it, right? I think we were at a point where it wasn't just the losing. I think anybody can look at this team right now with how many injuries we have and can see that this is not a complete team, that we need more depth, more pieces need to be added. And I still think we could have done some things with the lineup that we have, but I think it was simply the stubbornness, right? To stick to tactics that do not work well with the player pool that's available, right? The unwillingness to adapt to games as they continue to change from minute 1 to minute 90. And I think it's like, in some ways, I think some fans can maybe respect that Nico has principles. I would hear the MLS commentators talk about that a ton on Apple TV, right? You see it from coaches all over the world, right? Some just have very firm principles of how they want to play the game. And I understand that. But I think at some point, right, results matter. You have to be able to change and adapt as you see things may not be clicking, things may not be working. And we saw, as Dallas fans, for the first 30+% of the season, we saw that almost every game. Just this formation, this 3-4-2-1, and you know, playing out of the back, no matter what, despite the fact that we would see mistakes time and time again. I feel like it's a coach's job to recognize when another system may just suit your team better. And you don't have to necessarily even be the most veteran head coach out there, right? We've seen interim coach now, Peter Lusan, come into this role. And I think he might have ran the same system for a game, maybe two. And that makes sense, right? Because you can't just snap your fingers and expect to change up every tactic that you've been implementing for the whole season up to that point. So there's a little bit of slow progression there. But as of even this past weekend against Sporting Kansas City, we were running a 4-4-2. I've seen us run a 4-2-3-1. We've changed the system and approached every team independently. And I think that that's really based on the personnel that we have on the field and how much we've had to rotate due to injuries. We have to approach it that way. It only makes sense. And so, nothing against Nico. I think he's a decent coach. I think he will land on his feet somewhere. This was his first senior managerial job. And I think, that came with some heavy responsibility. I think even more pressure was added with the signing of Patar Musa. And the fact that he was scoring goals and you're still not getting results says everything it needs to say, right? So, Nico Estevez, I'm sure he'll find an opportunity to manage, whether it's elsewhere in MLS or other leagues abroad. I think he'll find his opportunity to get his next crack at a managerial position. But I mean, make no mistake, I think Peter Lusan can use the rest of the season to prove that he might be deserving of the job. And I would say this, like, for Dallas fans who are kind of maybe asking themselves where we go next managerial wise, Dallas doesn't really have a history of spending on managers. We just don't. We don't go out and get sexy names at that position.
Yeah, there
In
was Hugo
fact,
Perez at the beginning.
yeah,
I mean,
uh,
Hugo Sanchez.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, look, I mean, so many fans throw all kinds of names, right? I mean, I think it's much of like what we see at the U.S. men's national team level, or even the El Tri level with Mexico, that you know fans hold managers to very high standards and want to see a very big name kind of be approached or be offered the job. And with Dallas, that's just never been the case. We've never been that team. So I expect us to either promote from within or to maybe land someone with a similar profile to Nico, from the sense of it's one of their first jobs and they have this need to prove themselves and potentially to work for maybe I don't want to say less pay than the position would normally command, but that has been Dallas's MO for such a long time now. So I think Lusan has the chance to prove this position is his, and the beauty of that is that he's been coaching for FC Dallas since he retired here and has worked his way completely through the youth ranks, now cracking into the first team as a manager. So he knows this club in and out, knows what it stands for through and through, knows what type of expectations the ownership has. And so he's going to get every chance to prove that he belongs to stay here in Dallas long term.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to you describe the way that FC Dallas operates, because as a longtime LA Dodgers fan, it reminds me of like the early history of the Dodgers here in Los Angeles. They were always proud of doing things the Dodger way, which was promoting from within, relying on their farm system,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to do things almost internally. And it was rare for the Dodgers to go out and get like a big name from some other club, or splash big for other big names within the league. Um, and now you look at the Dodgers now, and it's all out the window, right? They're just like spending, spend, 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 spend. So listening to you, I'm like, that kind of reminds me of the old school Dodgers, right? In the Dodger way. So is is
Yeah.
is it is it like really accepted? Like there's the FC Dallas way, because we know how with the academy they were quick to sell players, but now they're trying to retain some of them, right?
Yeah, and I think maybe some of that is due to, I don't want to say it's directly due to Peter Lusan. I think he understands, right? Like I said, coming from he spent his last, I think, like 1 or 2 years. Granted, he didn't play all that much due to injury and whatnot when he was a player, but in the last couple of years as a player in FC Dallas, and then like I said before, made his way. I mean, was coaching U12 upon retirement, and I think he'd even credited. It's kind of weird to say. You think about it. I think it's Tarek Scott, Nolan Norris, and one other player that I can't think off the top of my head. It might be one other player. He was coaching these players when they were kids for the FC Dallas youth system, right? And then now just happened to be right. He's worked his way through. The players have worked their way through, and now they're here. I think he can help bring some of that back, that philosophy that is so deeply rooted into this club back to FC Dallas. Because you're right, and we talked about it a little bit before. The club has kind of, as the game has become a little more modern and how movement in the market such a big piece of how clubs operate. I think Dallas maybe had over the years has gotten a little bit of a FOMO, right? Not from the spending perspective, but more from selling, like making money from our products that are so highly touted in this nationwide famous academy. So I think now giving some of these players a chance, like seeing Nolan Norris out there get minutes that he rarely ever got under Nico Estevez. We haven't even seen Tarek Scott prior to 2 weeks ago get onto the field, and now he's there. I think just finding a way to make some of those youngsters relevant in the first team. I'll almost take that as somewhat of a consolation that we're kind of going back to how we've done things. And for the rest of the Dallas faithful, that we all know that that's never equated to the major trophy in the past, winning MLS Cup. But we've gotten pretty darn close. And I think that in this age where we have gone out and signed a premium striker in Patar Musa, complementing that with some youngsters that are coming through the ranks, and just finding a way to blend that in a really successful way, I think could be the formula for Dallas moving forward. So I'm hoping that this new interim coach can keep some of these trends running.
You mentioned some names in there, and I was going to ask you, other than Pitar Musa, who else has stepped up for FC Dallas? Because obviously you look at the statistics, and he's got 11 goals. Obviously Ferreira's out, so a lot of the responsibility has fallen on him. But
Mhm.
has anybody else been able to step out and say, "Hey, Musa, it's okay, buddy. We got you. Can you help you out?"
Yeah, I mean, look, I think well, first and foremost, I got to give him his flowers. I think the single greatest player on this team at the moment absolutely has to be Martin Boss. I think
Oh
he's
yeah.
criminally underpaid. First and foremost, I think he makes like a third of what guys like Paul Arriola and Jesus Pereira make. Which let that sink in for a second. But Boss being the only keeper that was fan voted into MLS All Star, our only All Star on the FC Dallas roster, man, I think it speaks volumes of how good
I
he's
voted for
been.
him, by the way.
Yeah, I
No,
appreciate that. I voted for him too. I
hey,
voted
he's
for him too. Yeah,
fantastic. I
he
remember
has, man. Yeah, he's
he
been
did. If it wasn't,
insane.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I just
No, you're
remember
good.
if it wasn't for him, that game against the Galaxy would have been a lot more than
Oh,
it
it would have
was.
been. That's the case for several games, and I think, in all honesty, when we played against St. Louis, you kind of saw two, fantastic keepers and Martin Foss and Roman Berkey, kind of going back and forth, save after save. It was a 2-0, but there were so many opportunities on both sides of the ball that if you were there, it was a great game to watch. Both keepers putting on a showing. But outside of Martin Foss, who's been terrific all season, I will say under this new manager, the player who has absolutely shined brighter than anybody on the pitch has to be someone you're very familiar with in Sebastian Lletget. Lletget has easily been the conductor, I will say, and maybe it's the tactics, maybe it's where we're setting him up now and where he's able to get the ball. It is a little bit deeper and a little more central to where he was typically getting involved with the play and the build-up under Nico Estevez. But man, he's found a way, I think, to put his stamp on games. And I will say over the last maybe 5+ matches, I mean, every single time whether he's coming on as a sub or starting, he tends to put his stamp on the match. I mean, even this last game against Kansas City, the game changed dramatically. We were down 2-0. He comes onto the field and we start to really kind of flow a little bit. And it's a shame that, he is, what is he now? 31, maybe 32. It's one of those things where I kind of wish we had him a little bit earlier in his player cycle, but man, he's finding a way to fill a gap that I think Paxton Pomykal left behind, and especially when you don't have aging midfielders like Iaramendi on the field, because he is so good for us, but at the same time, he's 34, 35. He can't play every game. Leget's been able to kind of fill that gap. So I'm grateful that he has found his wings, so to speak, under Peter Lusan.
uh, sorry, real quick. We have a question from one of our listeners, and it kind of fits into the conversation, and that's why I'm asking now. I was going to ask you later, but
Yeah.
he asked, his name is Ben. He's a big Galaxy fan. He asked, obviously, there is a talent gap between FC Dallas and LA Galaxy at the moment. But where do you think you can compete the most? Number one.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, what positions do you think you need the improvement the most? And before you answer those, I was going to seg into the question about what your expectations are for the summer transfer window. But if you want, we can answer these first two
Yeah.
on their own.
And I think it'll line up that question around the summer window pretty nicely. So, first and foremost, where I think we can compete the most, it's got to be, the fact that we have someone with the profile of Patar Musa against center backs like the Galaxy have, right? And I think, we're still waiting to see, what post injury Jalen Neal looks like, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like he's still so fresh off of that, technically speaking, like probably needs a little bit more time. But I think, the set pieces are going to be where I would bet Dallas can compete the most. Being able to target Musa against a team that has tended to leak goals in the back on some of these set pieces is going to be where I imagine Peter Lusan is going to put all of his game plan and strategy on the offensive side moving forward. That's where I think will be the most competitive. And if Lletget is able to link up with Musa in a fantastic way, I think those two have to be on the same page through and through. If they are able to find each other more than a few times on the pitch against the Galaxy this Saturday, I like our chances of being able to walk out of there on our own home soil with some kind of a result. Now,
Before
where
you go on, by the
oh,
way,
go ahead.
you mentioned Jalen Neal and the set pieces issue. That was something that really plagued the team earlier in the season. It seemed that things had gotten better. It seemed like
Mm-hmm.
Galaxy had kind of tightened things up as far as set pieces. If you look at the statistics right now, LA Galaxy has given up the least amount of goals on open play, but in the game against LAFC, it came back in like a spectacular fashion.
Yeah.
Jalen Neal, he's a fantastic player. He has a bright future. Got absolutely dunked on by Kai Kamara, who was a man who's like half the size, probably twice his age. And Kamara got up there. That was a nice goal. I mean, I gotta give him, his credit. But yeah, you could tell that Neal is still adjusting to getting back and being in full form. Uh, I know a lot of Galaxy fans have a lot of expectations on him because we remember what level he was playing at before he got injured last year. But there's moments like this when you're like, yeah, he's still young, he's still learning, and there's probably some issues in his play that he's still getting over. Because when you're coming off an injury, it's one thing to have a doctor tell you, yeah, you're fine, you can go. But in your mind, in the back of your head, you're thinking, what if I do something that'll tweak that again? And it's always there, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think you hit it right in the head. It's a mental thing for Neal, and that's why I said like I think it's so early to judge him, post injury on what his play is going to be like. He probably needs the rest of the season to get his feet under him, get another full preseason of strengthening himself back up to the level that we all know he can play at. And I think that we'll see, probably a revamped version of Neal heading into the 2025 season. But yeah, I think whether he continues to get solid minutes or not, yeah, I think that snapshot of Kamara jumping so clear, not just of Neal, but frankly the entire line, to get that goal, it just kind of says everything about why I think we have an opportunity to take advantage, not even just on set pieces. I think we'll also maybe even be able to get 2 or 3 balls into Musa where he'll have an opportunity to show his physicality. And I think that as Dallas fans, we've seen it quite a bit. So many, I would say probably a good 60+% of those 11 goals he scored this season have probably ones that he just had to muscle his way through the back line. He got a ball, he had to find a way to turn. He's such a big guy, and he's got pace on him. And it's one of those things where if you're not ready for it as a center back, which Galaxy, they will be. We just played each other not too long ago. They'll probably already have a good understanding of how they need to try and match up there, how physical they have to be and match him to ensure that he doesn't run loose, in that game this Saturday. So that's going to be the area where we can compete, I think, the best. The biggest opportunity for improvement absolutely has to be our back line. And, this to me is one of the tricky ones, right? Because in my opinion, and this is maybe a hot take because I think it was a hot take when I said it, when we beat Portland last Saturday, we beat Portland after coming back. But so many of those mistakes that we made in that game to even go down in the first 10 minutes were defensive mistakes that should not happen. And from players that I don't expect them to happen, but they keep happening. And the culprit I'll name the most is Nkosi Tafari, a defender that I've rated very highly over the last couple seasons. And I thought he was really going to come into his own this year. I don't know if confidence and his mentality dropped off significantly due to the losing streak under Nico Estevez. But the decline of Tafari game over game, it pains me. It's been tough to watch because it's someone that everything from his ability to win 50-50 duels to his long ball passing to even simple, passes on the ground that are supposed to break lines into the midfield. It, for whatever reason, it's just felt nonchalant, like he's kind of almost carefree back there with the ball sometimes. I don't see the urgency that I feel like I need to be seeing from center backs. It's concerning, and I think even Estevez saw this. We saw a few games early on in the season where he got benched for Omar Gonzalez. And that right there is a concern, right? Because Gonzalez was supposed to be nothing more than a depth piece this season. He's supposed to be a rotational piece to offer fresh legs when needed. And him having to step up and be a starter for more than a couple games in a row is concerning, especially when your best center back is not putting in shifts the way you want him to. So I think this leads me to that final question around where we can reinforce. It has to be defensively. It has to be center backs. We need, if we could have another physical monster, signed and brought in alongside Tafari. Nothing against Ibiaga. I think Ibiaga is a solid player for what he offers. But as knowing that he's someone that came out of the Houston Academy, had a good amount of time in USL, and then came to MLS. He's also not the physical prototype you really want in a center back. He's a little bit shorter, not quite as much of a physical build. He plays physical, don't get me wrong, but I feel like there's just opportunities missed sometimes if it's just Tafari and Ibiaga. So I really want to see us reinforce and strengthen the center back position pretty heavily if we can. But we'll find out. I would say center back and center mid are our two most glaring holes. And I would say if you're any team in MLS, those are the last two holes you really want to have are right in the middle of the park. You kind of want to make sure that you tighten those up. So I'm hoping those two positions, but if we even get one of those, I'll be decently happy.
Sorry about that. Do you have any expectations for the summer transfer window, or do you feel that the season is a wash, or is it early enough that FC Dallas can kind of sneak into the playoffs and maybe still challenge for a trophy, whether it's MLS or you maybe even Leagues Cup?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I think we're at that point of the season where the tides have to start turning now if you're going to meaningfully make a playoff push. Right now, Dallas is in that weird spot where, we're a couple games outside of a playoff spot. We're there with like Minnesota, St. Louis, Austin's above us by a good amount, but there's time and we still have to play Austin one more time, so there's still time to turn some things around if we can string together some results. But I do fear that the earliest start to the season, the very negative start we had to the season under Nico Estevez may have put us in a pretty deep hole, right? So, and coming out of that without meant several of your key starters, guys like Jesus Ferreira, guys like Paxton Pomykal, guys like even Giovanni Jesus or at for a longest period of time, Farfan wasn't available. He's finally back now. So like there's pieces that we still have to bring back in to be at quote unquote full strength. And maybe that'll give us the push that we need. However, if we do not make a playoff push, I still believe that we need to make at least one signing to win a trophy. Right tonight, as we record, we have Sporting Kansas City in the quarterfinals of the Open Cup. If we win this game, once you're in the semifinals of any tournament, everything's up for grabs. And then, of course, we have Leagues Cup, which if it wasn't for Messi and friends last season, and one of the craziest games in the whole tournament, who knows how far we could have gone in that tournament, right? I mean, we were winning, and before you know it, because of Messi, we're not. That's just kind of how it works. So I think there's still something to play for, no matter what. And even if for whatever reason cup opportunities move on and move past us, you still fight to the end. It doesn't matter. Things can always at the finish line completely shake up. And if you take your foot off the gas because you thought you didn't really have an opportunity, you're just doing your entire fan base a disservice. So I still think we need to treat the rest of the season like there's still an opportunity for us to do something, which means we have to make a move in the market.
Wow, a big push in that direction would come with a victory over LA Galaxy this weekend, I'm sure. Now, shifting the attention to the game this weekend, is quickly the history between both clubs. Both of them MLS legacy clubs, LA Galaxy and FC Dallas, have played each other 82 times, and it's really tight. Galaxy has 36 wins, including that last one earlier this season. Dallas has 33 wins with only 13 draws between them. So there's more often than not, there's a winner and there's a loser. You just mentioned a few names as far as player availability. Just real quick, like to recap, Jesus Ferreira is out, right? Paxton Pomykal done for the season, correct? You mentioned Giovanni Jesus, Alan Velasco, Patrickson Delgado, and Liam Fraser, all out, correct?
Correct. The Patrickson one hurts actually too, not thinking about it, but yes, they're all out.
And as far as LA Galaxy is concerned, Johnny Perez is still dealing with a hamstring issue. Gaston Brugman, who is dealing with a knee issue, has taken this opportunity to go down to Uruguay and get his green card, which is fantastic for the LA Galaxy. That means once he completes that process, it's going to free up an international spot, which comes at a time when there's a lot of talk about how Marco Reus is close to joining the club. In case anybody wants to know, the latest we always hear is that they're in contract negotiations. So when you never know, from here to there. Maybe he might show up. He might feature in League's Cup. But for now, it's just a lot of talk. Um, Real quick, Jose, I looked up the referee statistics. You mentioned a little bit about him before we got on, just to
Mm-hmm.
let everybody know. The referee that's going to be handling the game this weekend is Rami Tushan. I think I don't want to butcher his name. Rami Tukan. Since 2018, um, Tushan has refereed 89 MLS regular season matches, including 5 involving LA Galaxy, which yielded 1 win, 2 draws, 2 losses overall, and just 1 draw on the road. He has refereed 8 FC Dallas matches for, strangely enough, 1 win, 6 draws, and 1 loss overall, and with a record of 1 win, 5 draws, and 1 loss at home for FCD. And if you look at his statistics, he's not afraid to hand out yellow cards. Averages about 2.32, but he'll throw out 5 or 6 in a game if he wants to. So just something to keep in mind. Looking at this, what's your prediction for this match?
Man, this was gonna be very tight. I think it's gonna be closer because we're at home. It's going to be closer than the previous game against the Galaxy, where I felt like we were really lucky to stave off many of the chances the Galaxy had go, in that game as a whole until, we got the red card and then Ricky Puig kind of put the nail in the coffin. I think for this week, without some of the players that we even had available for that game, I think man, I'm going to be optimistic and say that I think at home Dallas can rally the wagons and find a way to get the job done. But it won't be unscathed. I think it's going to be a 2-1 Dallas. I think last time for this matchup on the road I said 1-1 and we lost 3-1. So who knows? I could be completely wrong on this. But I really do believe in order for that to happen, we have to be able to convert our chances. Against Cincinnati, against Sporting Kansas City, there were so many chances that we just rude missing, and they were able to punish on in both occasions. That can't happen against a team as good as the Galaxy, against a team who has informed players like Gabriel Peck. If we give them a sniff without converting our chances, it's going to be a long day at home. So I'm also hoping, fingers crossed, the Texas Heat has something to say, but it has been, according to you, very hot in LA, so maybe it won't be as big of a factor.
No, I mean Texas Heat is something completely different, man. I lived in Kansas and I know how bad it gets in that part of that country.
Yeah.
Um, as far as what I think, man, Galaxy has a really hard time on the road, especially in Texas. I'm gonna play it safe and say a 2-2 draw. Looking at the ref, he loves draws when it comes to LA Galaxy and FC Dallas. So I'm gonna look at that and be like, yeah, this guy's probably gonna have a draw between them. So 2-2 draw for me. Real quick before we wrap up, I'm running out of time over here, but there's probably going to be some traveling Galaxy fans.
Mm-hmm.
Suggestions that you have for as far as food, bars, entertainment around the stadium, and maybe the day of.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's Frisco, so there's going to be if that's one thing, right? For those who have never traveled to Texas for this game, and if you're going, remember this is Frisco, not Dallas proper specifically, so it's about 35 minutes north. There's a good amount to do out there. I think, even right around the stadium, right? Whether you're going to, the Green Gator or Ritolos or Cheetos for some Mexican food, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I would say all the spots for the most part are pretty good. But if you do want to hang out with some Dallas fans prior to the game, which I think that's kind of the beauty of us doing this pod, or of us just traveling for away days, whatever it may be, is for the fan base just to come together, man. Whether it's breaking bread, having drinks, it's always a good time. El Matador does a really, really awesome tailgate, and they start about 2.5 hours early. So they're right there in the parking lot where everybody tends to be, right across the street from the stadium. You can't miss it. There's tents, there's food, music, always a good time. I know Galaxy throws more than a few awesome tailgates as well. That fan base does, a supporters group. So it's gonna feel like vibes. I think it's gonna be hot. Prepare yourself for that. It is gonna be hot. 7 p.m. It might as well be 4 in the afternoon. Like, the sun will not go down, and it's gonna be a sweaty one. And I think, as long as you're okay with that, you're probably gonna have a good time. So anybody needs any personalized recommendations, man, throw those my way. Shoot me a DM on Twitter. I'm always happy to help.
Well said. Thank you so much. We are running out of time. But as always, we look forward to seeing you again. Hopefully, maybe in Leagues Cup playoffs. Maybe.
Yeah.
But for now, everyone, thank you so much. This has been Music House Galaxy, the midweek show. As always, keep on nagging. Hey, and we tag for life, baby.